Have you ever, like, really stopped and looked closely at a water droplet? It's kind of like a tiny little curved mirror, right? Reflecting everything around it.
Yeah.
But what if there's more to it than meets the eye? What if it's not just a pretty reflection?
Right.
Today, we're diving deep into this idea that water with its reflective properties could actually be showing us a whole new way of understanding the universe. And our source for this deep dive is an online post that explores how water droplets might actually be acting like mini holograms.
Wow, that's a fascinating idea, and it ties into some pretty mind-blowing concepts about information and how it's stored.
Yeah, for sure.
But to get started, I think it might be helpful to break down just what a hologram actually is.
Okay, so holograms, those are those 3D images you sometimes see like on credit cards or in museums, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They always seem kind of magical to me.
They are pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The way they work is by capturing these light interference patterns.
Hmm.
So basically, they're recording how light waves interact with each other after reflecting off of an object. And this allows them to recreate these incredibly realistic 3D images.
So it's not just a photograph then. It's capturing something more complex about the way light interacts with the object.
Exactly. And here's where it gets really, really interesting.
Okay.
If you were to cut a hologram in half, you don't get half the image.
Oh, really?
You actually get the whole image,
Wow.
just at a lower resolution.
Really? I would have guessed you would just get like half the picture.
Yeah, it challenges our usual way of thinking about information storage.
Right.
We tend to think of it as localized, like a file on a computer,
Yeah.
But holograms show us that information can be distributed
Mm.
with the whole picture contained in every single piece, no matter how small.
That's a completely different way of looking at it.
It is.
So how does this principle of like the whole being present in each part, how does that apply to a simple water droplet?
Well, think about how a water droplet acts like a tiny lens capturing light from its surroundings. It's reflecting that light, but it's also refracting it. It's bending the light as it passes through.
Uh-huh.
And this combination of reflection and refraction creates that miniature view of the world that we see in a droplet.
So you're saying the way a water droplet interacts with light is similar to how a hologram captures and recreates an image.
Yeah, there are definitely some fascinating parallels there.
Okay.
And this idea of the water droplet capturing a miniature version of the world,
Right.
it really resonates with that ancient concept of the microcosm, this tiny world reflecting the larger macrocosm around it.
Right.
But it goes even deeper than that.
Okay, tell me more. What do you mean deeper?
Well, we have to remember that light carries energy.
Hmm.
So that water droplet isn't just capturing an image, it's also capturing information about the energy of everything it's reflecting.
So it's more than just a pretty picture then. It's like the water is actually interacting with its surroundings on an energetic level, almost recording it in a way.
Exactly. Now, this next part is where things get a bit more speculative.
Well, okay.
But there's even an idea, though, still debated, that water might be able to remember information
Oh, wow.
through changes in its molecular structure. Like it's storing the experience of what it's interacted with.
Hold on, water having a memory? That's blowing my mind a little bit. I definitely want to hear more about that.
Yeah, we'll dive into that fascinating concept in a bit.
Okay.
But before we go down that rabbit hole, let's talk about the shape of water.
Mm-hmm.
Our source points out how water's surface tension plays a really crucial role in all of this.
Right. Water always forms those perfect round droplets.
Yeah?
What's the science behind that again?
It all comes down to surface tension. That force that makes water molecules stick together, creating a sort of skin on the surface of the water, pulling it into that classic rounded droplet shape.
Okay.
And that shape is essential because it acts like a tiny lens, allowing the droplet to create those holographic-like reflections.
So form and function are really intertwined here. The droplet's shape is actually what enables it to reflect and potentially hold information in this way.
Exactly. And when you connect this to the bigger picture, the idea that information might be holographic and distributed throughout the universe,
Right.
it makes you wonder about the role water plays in all of this, especially considering that water is quite literally everywhere.
Okay, I have to admit my mind is officially in the realm of whoa right now. We're talking about water droplets potentially holding vast amounts of information reflecting the energy of their surroundings and maybe even having a kind of memory. What are the implications of all this? Our source mentions some philosophical and metaphysical possibilities, and I have to say I'm really intrigued.
Well, for one thing, it starts to blur the lines between what we consider physical and non-physical. If information is holographic, then it's not just about the matter itself,
Right.
but about the patterns and energy that connect everything.
So we're not just talking about cool science here, but a whole new way of seeing reality.
Exactly. And it echoes that ancient wisdom that saw interconnectedness in everything. The idea that we're all part of a larger whole, and that even a tiny water droplet can reflect the vastness of the universe.
Wow. I'm feeling a serious sense of awe right now.
Yeah.
But before we get too lost in the vastness of it all, I think we need to unpack this idea of water having a memory.
Okay.
I'm dying to hear more about that.
Yeah, you're right. The idea of water having a memory is one of the most intriguing aspects of this whole discussion. It
Yeah.
really, pushes the boundaries of what we traditionally think of as possible.
I'm all ears. What kind of evidence is there to support this idea?
Well, it's important to note that this is still a very much debated topic within the scientific community. Some researchers suggest that water molecules might be able to form unique structures based on the substances they've interacted with, almost like an imprint or a memory.
So it's not that the water is like consciously remembering things, but rather its structure is changing in subtle ways that reflect its past experiences.
It's exactly. One researcher who's done some fascinating work in this area is Dr. Masaru Emoto.
Okay.
He conducted experiments where he exposed water to different words, music, and even emotions,
Wow.
and then froze the water to examine its crystalline structure.
What did he find?
His photographs showed that water, exposed to positive words or harmonious music, formed these beautiful symmetrical crystals,
Oh, wow.
while water exposed to negative words or harsh noises formed distorted or incomplete crystals.
That's amazing. But I can imagine that kind of research has been met with some skepticism.
Yes, absolutely. While his work is visually striking, it's important to be cautious about interpreting the results.
Right.
There are concerns about the methodology and the potential for subjective bias in the way that crystals were analyzed.
So it's more at a starting point for further investigation rather than conclusive proof.
Precisely. However, even if we set aside Dr. Emoto's work, the idea that water's structure can be influenced by its environment is supported by other scientific findings.
Okay.
For example, we know that water molecules can form clusters.
Yeah.
And the size and shape of these clusters can be affected by things like temperature, pressure, and the presence of other molecules.
So while the idea of water remembering specific words or emotions might be debatable,
Yeah.
the fact that its structure can change based on external factors is well established.
Yes, and that in itself is pretty mind-blowing.
Mm.
It suggests that water is much more dynamic and responsive than we often give it credit for.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what other secrets water might be holding.
Right.
Earlier, we talked about holograms and how they demonstrate that information can be distributed rather than localized.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a connection between that concept and the idea of water's memory?
That's a great question. And it takes us into some pretty deep territory. If water can indeed store information in its structure, and if that structure can be influenced by a wide range of factors,
Right.
then it's conceivable that each drop of water contains a vast amount of information about its history and its surroundings.
So in a way, each water droplet could be like a tiny dynamic hologram.
Yeah.
Reflecting not just its current environment, but also its past experiences.
That's a fascinating way to think about it.
Yeah.
And it ties into those ancient ideas about the interconnectedness of everything.
Right.
If water can hold this kind of information, and if water is everywhere, then it suggests a level of interconnectedness that's truly awe-inspiring.
Okay. My head is officially spinning.
Yeah.
We've gone from talking about pretty reflections in a water droplet
I know.
to exploring the potential for water to hold vast amounts of information, possibly even acting as a kind of memory of the universe.
Yeah,
It's a lot to take in.
it is. But I think it's important to remember that we're just at the beginning of understanding these concepts. There's still so much we don't know about water and its true potential.
That's both exciting and a little bit daunting. But before we get overwhelmed by the vastness of it all,
Yeah.
I think it's worth revisiting that concept of the fractal universe that we touched on earlier.
Okay.
How does that idea relate to everything we've been discussing?
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle. The idea of a fractal universe suggests that similar patterns repeat at different scales,
Right.
from the microscopic to the cosmic.
Mm.
And when you consider the potential for water to store information and reflect its surroundings in this holographic way, it hints at a level of interconnectedness and unity that's truly mind-boggling.
So you're saying that the same principles that might govern the structure of a water droplet could also be at play in the formation of galaxies, the
Yeah,
patterns of weather systems,
all right.
or even the way our brains process information.
Exactly. And that raises some really intriguing questions about the nature of reality itself.
Mm,
If everything is interconnected in this way, if the same patterns are repeating at all levels,
right.
then what does that tell us about our place in the grand scheme of things?
Those are big questions, and they lead us right into another mind-blowing concept we've been dancing around,
Yeah.
holographic consciousness.
Yes. That's where things get really interesting.
I have a feeling this is where my brain might melt a little. But I'm ready to dive in. Okay, I think I've caught my breath after that last revelation. We went from the beauty of a simple water droplet to the concept of a fractal universe, and now this holographic consciousness. I have to admit, I'm both fascinated and a little intimidated to dive into this one.
Well, it's definitely a mind-bending concept,
Right?
but let's try to approach it gently. Essentially, the idea of holographic consciousness suggests that our individual awareness might not be solely confined to our brains, but could actually be part of a larger interconnected field of consciousness.
So instead of our minds being like separate and isolated,
Yeah,
they're actually connected to something much larger, maybe even a universal consciousness.
that's one interpretation. Think back to those holograms we discussed earlier.
Right.
Each piece contains information of the whole image, right?
Right.
Well, some researchers propose that our individual consciousnesses might be like those pieces of a hologram, each reflecting the whole, but from a unique perspective.
Wow. If that's true, it completely changes how we view ourselves and our relationship to the universe. It's like suddenly realizing we're all part of this grand interconnected web of awareness.
Exactly. And it starts to make those ancient spiritual teachings about oneness and interconnectedness
Right.
feel a lot less abstract and a lot more tangible.
Yeah, it's amazing to think that science might be starting to catch up with those ancient insights. But how does this idea of holographic consciousness actually play out in our lives? What difference does it make?
Well, for one thing, it has the potential to shift our entire perspective on reality.
Okay.
If we truly are all interconnected,
Right.
then our actions, thoughts, and emotions have a ripple effect that extends far beyond ourselves.
That's a huge responsibility.
Yeah,
It makes you really consider the impact of your choices, knowing they could be influencing the larger field of consciousness.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It also invites us to cultivate a sense of empathy and compassion.
Mm.
If we're all part of the same universal consciousness,
Mm.
then harming in other persons and ultimately harming ourselves.
It's like that saying, hurt people hurt people. If we're all connected, then healing and kindness become even more important.
Yeah,
Not just for our own well-being, but for the well-being of the whole.
exactly. And it can also bring a profound sense of belonging and purpose.
Mm.
Knowing that we're not alone, that we're part of something much bigger than ourselves, can be incredibly comforting and inspiring.
Yeah, I can see how that would be life-changing, like realizing you're not just a solitary wave, but part of the entire ocean. But I have to admit, wrapping my head around the concept of a universal consciousness is still a bit challenging. It's so vast.
It is. But even if we can't fully grasp it intellectually,
Right.
I think we can still experience it intuitively. Moments of deep connection with nature, feelings of love and compassion, even those aha moments of insight,
Mm-hmm.
those could all be glimpses of that larger consciousness at work.
It's like those moments when you feel a sense of awe and wonder at the beauty of the world, or when you feel a deep sense of connection with another person, or even with all of humanity. Suddenly, the idea of a universal consciousness doesn't seem so far-fetched.
Yeah, and remember, we started this whole conversation with a simple water droplet.
Right.
It's a reminder that even the most ordinary things can hold profound secrets and reflect something much larger than themselves.
So if we take all of this in the idea of water as a mini hologram, the concept of a fractal universe and the possibility of a holographic consciousness, what's the main takeaway for our listeners today? What do we want them to walk away with?
I think the most important message is that we're not just isolated individuals. We're part of a vast interconnected web of energy and information. And that connection extends far beyond what we can see or touch.
It's a call to recognize the profound unity that underlies all of existence.
Yes.
To remember that our actions have ripple effects, to cultivate empathy and compassion, and to approach life with a sense of wonder and curiosity.
Beautifully said. And the next time you see a water droplet, whether it's in a puddle, on a leaf, or even in your own glass, take a moment to appreciate its beauty and its mystery. Let it be a reminder of the interconnectedness of all things and the incredible potential that lies within each of us.
That's a beautiful way to wrap things up. Thanks for guiding us through this incredible deep dive. I don't think I'll ever look at a water droplet the same way again.
It's my pleasure. And remember, the journey of discovery never truly ends. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep looking for those hidden connections that weave the tapestry of the universe.
Please click like and then subscribe. Also share this video with your friends. Thank you.